Next topic we're going to talk about is the Lloyd Pierce. He was recently fired, and I think his overall record with the Hawks was 65-120. He spent 3 seasons with the Hawks, more like 2.5. And yes, what do you think about this firing? How do you feel about it? And is this ultimately going to make the Atlanta Hawks a better team or a worse team? Nate McMillan is currently the interim coach for that team.
Why you say?
I think it'll make them a better team in the regular season. Obviously, we saw Nate McMillan's track record in Indiana. He did a great job with those Pacers teams during the regular season. And, the trademark was always falling short in the playoffs, and that resulted in his firing. I think that Lloyd Pierce had run his course. The players wanted him out. They all supposedly supported this move and wanted to see things with a new head coach. I think that it was the right move to make. I don't think the Hawks have been healthy this season, so it might have just been unfortunate circumstances, but it's been 3 years now. He hasn't had any success, and there was talent even with injuries this year. There was talent. They should 100% be doing better than they have been doing. I think the offense has been really stagnant. I know John Collins was very unhappy with it earlier in the season, so I'd like to see them with Nate McMillan and see what they can do, but I think that this was definitely the right move.
Oh, I thought you wanted to go. I look at it 50-50. The team hasn't been healthy. Only, 4 out of the – I'm looking at it right now. Trae Young, Kevin Huerter, John Collins, and Solomon Hill have played 30 games. So their key guys have been missing games. But from what I read from the reports, it looking like Lloyd Pierce was favoritism a lot of the players, and a lot of the guys backed Trae Young who didn't want him there. So it looked like he was really the main problem. But at the end of the day, I feel like it wasn't all on him. He just couldn't handle egos. Egos from young guys coming in, it's going to be hard to definitely assess them. So at the same time, you could look at it as his fault. But this team wasn't healthy, so you can't put the blame all on him because they haven't been on the court for most of the time. So I give him like 50-50 to blame.
You guys ready for what I'm about to say?
Probably going to say some nonsense.
Okay. So Lloyd Pierce was fired after 3 seasons, 65-120 record. His first year, they had a 35% win percentage. Second year, it dropped down to a 30% win percentage. And now this year, it was at a 44%, and he got let go. But like you mentioned, Trae Young and all the players, they didn't want him. And if your star player doesn't want the coach, he's probably going to get fired,
100%.
And because Lloyd Pierce is a black coach, this caught a lot of traction of, did he unfairly get fired? Did he get fired unfairly? And the argument came about that this doesn't happen to white coaches and stuff. But that's a lie. We saw earlier when Ryan Saunders got fired after a year and a half with Minnesota. And not only did Ryan Saunders get fired, but they hired his replacement in Chris Finch 30 minutes after he was hired. Literally, after he got fired, 30 minutes after.
From a different organization, too.
The same night, he was hired as their new head coach. Ryan Saunders only had, when he was coaching the Timberwolves, Karl-Anthony Towns and D'Angelo Russell only played 5 games together in a span of 80 games. What was the narrative behind that firing? The narrative behind Ryan Saunders' firing wasn't that he didn't have much to work with. Instead, it was, why didn't David Vanderpool get the job? That was a coach that developed Dame and CJ, and how much did he really develop, and we don't really know. But, that's the thing. And then we look at other coaches like Jim Boylan and stuff like that who didn't get much of an opportunity either, but that's because he was a bad coach, right?
Yeah, he was horrible.
And that's the thing is I think that especially when black coaches get hired, because a lot of people want to see more diversity within the coaching between coaches in the NBA, we kind of give them a lot of excuses when they don't succeed. Oh, if they get fired, it's because the team wasn't going to give them much of a shot because they are a black coach or something like that. But the average lifespan for an NBA coach in 2014 was 2.4 years. And if the majority of the coaches were white or whatever race they are, yeah, you usually get 3 years to make an organization relevant. If you can't, then you get fired. Just last season, and then we had some coaches like Greg Popovich and Rick Carlisle called out the Hawks, I think, for firing Lloyd Pierce. And I'm here to tell everybody that doesn't matter. Because last year when David Fizdale got fired from the Knicks, everybody clowned the Knicks. Everybody talked down on the Knicks. Oh, David Fizdale's finally getting away from that dysfunctional organization. A year later, we get a good coach in Tom Thibodeau. We're in the playoffs. So that's what I'm saying is that I don't think this has to do so much with race. I think this just has to do with that Lloyd Pierce, to this point, hasn't shown to be a good head coach. That's all I think it is.
Yeah, and he's being replaced by another African-American head coach.
Exactly. That's the thing, too. And, you know, Stephen A. Smith, I saw his first take on this, and he was like, it's suspicious. And I'm like, why is it suspicious? And then
you asked him?
No, I didn't. No, in my head I said it. But then
Stephen A., come on the show.
But then he talked about how Steve Nash is the only, like, white coaches get awarded opportunities to coach supreme talent usually, right? And then I got into researching, and it didn't take me long to find another example. Steve Nash got to coach Durant and Kyrie. Who was the coach that got to coach LeBron, Kyrie, and K-Love after they fired David Blatt like a year and a half into his tenure? Tyronn Lue. So, yes, there is an example of an African-American coach getting opportunity to coach a very talented team. So you can find that same example.
Yeah. And David Blatt was coming off a finals appearance, if I'm not mistaken.
With K-Love and Kyrie injured in the finals, and he was let go after being 30-11 his second season. So, you know,
that's so ridiculous.
But that's the thing. Like, if it was an African American head coach, the narrative would have been completely different around it. But because it wasn't, we don't look at it that way. And I'm not saying that the NBA doesn't need to be more diverse, because it definitely does. But I'm also saying that we can't try to make every firing simply about that and simply look at that as the reason why. Because a lot of people were overreacting to this Lloyd Pierce firing that, oh, why did they fire him? I mean, if you guys actually watched the Atlanta Hawks games, you'd know.
Yeah,
you would know.
It's not that guy.
You would know. You would know. And now they're getting a new head coach. And do I think they'll be better? Because Nate McMillan is a proven head coach, I think they will for the time being. Who knows if he's going to stay there, if they are going to get a new head coach. But for the time being, I think they'll be better. But they have to get healthy. Danilo has missed games. Bogdan Bogdanovic is still injured. Cam Reddish has been hurt. DeAndre Hunter has missed half the year. So there are a lot of things going on with the Atlanta Hawks right now.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. And I just think it's funny, like, the way they ran that offense rubbed a bunch of the Hawks players the wrong way and got them upset with Lloyd Pierce. But then Lloyd Pierce complained about the way Trae Young was drawing fouls, and it got Trae Young mad at Lloyd Pierce. So it was like nobody in the organization was happy with him. There's a lot that went on for this to happen. And when you go 3 seasons with a team, you don't your one improvement is a very small improvement after your team essentially went out and had their splash offseason trying to take the next step, and you're not even a playoff team. You've run your course.
Yeah.
It's hard to assess because it's like, okay, Pierce complained about Trae Young, right? But then John Collins complained about how the system was being run through Trae Young. We can all agree that John Collins is probably gone. He's probably not coming back. He's probably going to go. So Nate McMillan is a coach who coached for Indiana. Indiana is a place who doesn't have a lot of ego guys, who has a lot of guys who fits in the system, who just plays the game the right way. Atlanta is a situation where there's a lot of youth and a lot of young talent with potential and a lot of injuries. Is he going to be able to come in there and automatically change the culture like that and get these guys into winning basketball?
I think that he probably will, because he did coach Indiana, but he also coached Portland with Brandon Roy, Aldridge, Odin, all of those guys. I mean, they were hurt for most of the time, but, you know, he does have a track record because I think he has experience. They're going to be a bit better, but ultimately, I really think it's just about them getting healthy, which you can make the argument that if Lloyd Pierce would have stayed, this team is a 500 team if they would have stayed healthy, but they're not healthy. And to this point, Danilo Gallinari, he has been in and out of lineups, and not only that, but he has struggled this season thus far, and that was their big splash off-season signing. And I said it before the season.
Bogdan played 11 games.
Yep, and I said it before the season. I didn't think the Atlanta Hawks were going to make the playoffs because the East has a bunch of teams that have kind of just locked their spot in the playoffs already. We look at Brooklyn, Milwaukee, Boston, Miami, Philly, Indiana, Toronto. Like, that's 7. And Indiana's not even in their playoff race right now. So Atlanta was really going to be fighting for that 8th spot with the Knicks, the Hornets, and the Bulls, all of those teams. And did I think that they were more talented than those teams? I didn't, which is why I never thought Atlanta was going to make the playoffs. But Atlanta is in a tricky situation because they had that big splash free agency because they saw Trae Young was ascending into a star player. So they wanted to rush and get him help. The Pelicans did the same thing with Anthony Davis when they went out and got Tyreek Evans, Eric Gordon, Drew Holiday. They wanted to win now, and it backfired on them. We're kind of seeing something similar happen to the Atlanta Hawks because not only did they sign players that I don't feel like were worthy of the money, Bogdanovich is a nice player, but for that money, I don't think he was worth it. Danilo, very injury prone, an older player as well. So a lot of their moves didn't really make much sense.
Yeah, and they were oversigning guys at positions too, I thought. I think it would have made more sense to maybe hold on to the money and let it roll over. But the crazy thing is, they're still only 2 games out of the 5 seed. So if Nate McMillan can come in and turn things around here, they could still very easily be a playoff team. But it's definitely going to be interesting to see if he can come in and change things because this Hawks team is very different than a bunch of those Pacers teams he had. But I think at the end of the day, he will turn them around. Will it be enough to make them a playoff team? I think they'll be one of those teams that we see in the play-in games, and I think they could be a playoff team, but it'll be interesting to see if he's able to come in. And I think it would be wise for them to give him a chance to turn it around because right now they're in a stage where the playoffs should be a benchmark for them. Like, that should be a goal for them, and Nate McMillan was able to do that so often in Indiana. Like, get there first, and then you can reassess the situation. So I think it would be wise for them to give Nate McMillan a shot.
Early on this segment, I said that the average coach in 2014 got 2.4 years until they were fired. Right now, it's 3.7 years.
To 4.
So basically close to 4. So 3 is kind of just under that.
Yeah, and I mean, when you look at that number, there's a bunch of guys in the league that are skewing that. I mean, like
Rick
Popovich.
Carlisle, Popovich,
But those are the
Spoelstra.
proven guys. Like
Exactly.
If we look at the guys who have been coaching for the past 5 years,
Most
who
of them have
just
a
got
ring.
jobs, most of them are probably have been gone.
Exactly.
So that's why that number's kind of skewed. I'd say the average coach gets 2 to 3 years to prove themselves. If they don't make a considerable improvement, then they'll be gone. And that's the thing. I mean, if Lloyd Pierce would have made the playoffs once in Atlanta, he would have still been head coach, something to have. But because you don't make the playoffs, it's hard. Steve Clifford still has a job because he took Orlando to the playoffs like two years in a row. They got basically swept.
And they've been hurt too.
They got basically swept. But, most coaches get 2 to 3 years to prove themselves. If they don't prove themselves in that point, they're pretty much gone.
Yeah, and you got to understand it's a business. As a Net fan, I can speak towards Kenny Atkinson. Did an absolutely incredible job with the Brooklyn Nets. Helped turn them around from one of the worst teams in the league to a playoff team. Helped bring in KD and Kyrie. And then before KD even got out there, he was gone. What did he do wrong? He didn't do anything wrong, but the fact of the matter was they were just turning a new page as an organization, and they needed a communicator. And Kenny Atkinson is more of a developer. And so it didn't fit. Like, there is a lot that goes into these decisions. I think it's very short-sighted to say something like what Stephen A. said.
This is the era of player empowerment. Mm-hmm. So if your star player does not want that head coach, he's not going to be the coach. And Steve Nash got hired by the Nets because KD and Kyrie wanted him.
Yeah, people like to bring up the Jim Boylan situation. That was the same thing that happened. The team didn't want him. No, Laurie didn't want him. Zach didn't want him. So you're going to always pick the players you pay over the coach all the time.